About troubleshooting on the 2x2 control box. We're going to talk about the Z-axis, and we're going to talk about little steps we can take to test whether or not certain portions of the setup are faulty. Now, I have a lot running on this table, so we're going to start off with the basics here, which is we have X, Y, Z, P, and T. The Z-axis runs by running into the Z, and then it's being routed through the T port into the Z port. Reason for this is with the THC being wired the way it is, it needs direct control over the Z axis. It's a very common thing with USB based systems because it doesn't directly integrate into the Mach 3 system in the same way as serial port integrations do. Cool stuff. Let's get out of the technical and into just sort of kind of the basic running of all of this. So we have cables coming out of the the T axis here, the torch-type controller, and then we have the Z. The Z runs to a cable that's paired to this particular wiring, this here. This is attached to some terminal blocks here, and then we have another set of blocks right here. Fantastic, isn't it? All right. What we're going to do as a part of the initial test is we can test down here, to be sure. We can absolutely test down there. But what we can do is we can just remove this block here, and then remove these two blocks here, and actually take one of the two blocks that are here, and we have to just make sure we have the right one. In this case, I'm going to be taking from, now this board is lined up A, Z, Y, X, and I'm going to take the X-axis control wires. So that means that if we hit left and right on our control box, on our computer, it will drive this axis. So we can plug those control wires into here, and we plug a cable into the Z-axis because, again, this is a Z-axis block. It's outputting directly to the Z-axis. Plug in the motor, and we can attempt to run it by hitting left and right from the computer in order to ensure that we are getting up and down motion on here. If we are getting up and down motion, that means that the signals coming off of the small cable here are what's causing our issue. So we want to confirm that. If it doesn't work properly, then it has everything to do with either the driver or the output signal here. And a way that we can remove the output signal here as a variable is, again, we can remove this block. Now we have the input, that's the X-axis, and we have an output that is the Z-axis. We can then swap one of these other blocks here, either the X or the Y, and we can replace that block here and then attempt to run it off of whatever block we're outputting from. In this case, I have this out to here, which would be the X motor. So we can get it to output to the X motor here, and we can determine whether or not it's the driver, because we know that if the wires coming from here out to here to the X-axis, and if the X-axis has worked previously, we're just using the same control wires and the same output wires. The only variable that we're changing is the driver. If we check that and we see that it's still giving us the issue, it's the driver. If not, then it's going to be in one of the sets of cabling, and that is the cabling that's running here. That is the ZD, which is this blue one here, and then the ZP, which is this yellow one here, I believe, and I can just double check that here. Yep, ZD and ZP over here. We can then take those cables and trace them back into here. And one of the simplest things we can do is we can actually just unscrew and check that all of the wires are properly stripped and making contact with the terminals here. Otherwise, if not, then we're going to run into issues with the actual up and down, and that would be causing our issues. Similarly, if we swapped the block and we didn't see issues, if we just swapped this initial block and didn't see issues, it's just this. If we swapped the block and we continued to see issues, but when we swapped this block we didn't see issues, it's this block, and we'll just have to check the continuity of the cables coming out of this block for the Z-axis. Let me know if that makes sense for you. If you have questions, I can break it down further. Lastly, over here, while we're checking this, we can also check the output of the P and D, and we'll be able to tell what signals are coming out of each in order to determine whether or not those signals are actually being sent out by the system properly. And then we ensure this by checking the connections to the Torchite controller, which also has a pulse and step and direction pin out that you can then test to ensure that it is coming back to this block here for the table, to run the table. So Z and D are coming out to here, connecting to the T port, and then pushing out from the THC back out to this output. So check those things out. Let me know if you have any other questions.